Hi, I'm Glyn Dewis and welcome to episode 12 of my video podcast. Okay, so to kick things off this week, we're going to start working on the picture that you can see on screen now. Now, before you say anything, I know this kind of photo has been done so many times, but I did this one on a recent photo walk down in Brighton on the coast, and it's just, I think really when you play around with this in Lightroom and Photoshop, there's actually quite a few little tips and techniques that could be beneficial to show, so that's why I'm showing it. But the one that you can see on the screen now is the final retouch picture, the one that I've played with just for a few moments. The out of camera shot is this one here, so there's quite a few things to go through. And like I said, we're going to do this one first, but one thing I will say is you'll notice there's lots of textures and all this kind of stuff on this picture here. What I'm not going to do is bring in any photos containing textures that I've taken. This is all going to be done directly within Photoshop, adding these textures and stuff. So I want to show you how we can do that without having to go off and get your own stock images to use in pictures like this. But first of all, then let's just dive over into the develop module with the out of camera shot. And there's a few things that I'm going to do first of all, but I'm going to do this really quickly because I literally spent just a few minutes doing this entire picture. So first thing I'll do, then I'm going to bring up the blacks in here so I can start to bring out some detail like so, and maybe lift up the shadows as well. That's obviously going to brighten it just a little bit too much, so I'm going to bring down the highlights like so, and also the saturation. I don't want this to be too overly saturated because we're going to make this look like an old kind of picture, something like that. And also clarity. I'm going to bring up the clarity, but one thing I'm mindful of when I bring up the clarity is I'm not going to go too far with that because I can always add some more in later on. So for now, that's about right with the clarity and the lighting or what have you. I do need to get rid of these people on here, so I'm going to first of all then dive over to my clone tool over here. So we've got this brush we can use now for actually removing people. We can actually either set it to clone or heal. Now I'm going to actually get rid of these completely here, so I'm going to just use clone and see how we get on. I might need to kind of finesse this later on in Photoshop, but Lightroom can get us pretty much all the way there, and it does a pretty good job of selecting areas to actually cover it over with. So I'm going to bring that over. You can actually click and drag to choose the area that you want. So we'll go for somewhere like that. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. If I bring my cursor outside of the picture, you see that these little pins disappear. And the reason for that is down at the bottom here, my preference where it says tool overlay, you've got a few choices. And this is how it can always display your pins or never show them or just auto. I have mine set to auto. So basically what that means is whenever my cursor is on top of the picture, you can see the pins. When I move it away, they disappear. So it's just a few extra little things I need to do. Let's get rid of that bird just there as well. And I'm going to get rid of that little spot just there. Move the cursor away. That does a pretty good job. But you'll notice as well, when I've done this now, let's just get rid of that brush and we'll just zoom in a little bit. You can see there's obvious outlines of where we've actually done this. We've actually moved this person away. You can see the difference where it's done all that cloning. That's a 2-second fix in Photoshop in a short while. So, right, we've done those ones there. Let's go and move over to the other side now. And we'll remove these people just here. It's great that we can now actually paint areas with this brush as opposed to only being a circle. Now, obviously, we're going to get a few repeating patterns, so we can work on that later on, again in Photoshop. But for now, just to get us to the stage where they disappeared, Lightroom does a pretty good job. So move the cursor away. And again, there you can see down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see that we've now got these kind of like difference in tones, but again we can sort that out very quickly in Photoshop. So I think that's probably all I want to do for now. So what we'll do is we'll head over into Photoshop to go and do a few more things. So I'm going to go to Photo, Edit in, and we'll take it over as a smart object because we're always talking about working non-destructively and smart. So if I take it over as a smart object into Photoshop, it's going to give us that flexibility to carry on working non-destructively. So open as a smart object in Photoshop. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and the first thing I'm going to do is just sort out where we remove these people and where I told you that we had these little changes in tones. And all I'm going to do for that is just add a blank layer, and I'm going to get my clone stamp tool, make sure that the brush is completely soft, but I'm not going to use it at 100%. I'm going to use it at around about 30% opacity. Let's just make it just a little bit bigger. And all I'm going to do is hold down my Alt Option key and just sample areas outside of the area that I want to cover over. So maybe around about here is good. Click and sample there. Then I'm just going to keep pressing down, lifting off and pressing down with my Wacom tablet. Just a few dabs like so, and that removes it. So now if I zoom in, you can see that now we don't see those differences in tones where we cloned that woman away. And if I turn it on and off, you can probably just see it around about this area here. You can see that we've just quickly got rid of it. So that's one way that I do that. Now let's go over to the other side because this one needed just a little bit more attention. So again, I'm going to keep that brush around about 30%. I'm going to sample just a little bit above it, hold that down and click. And then I'm just going to keep lifting off and pressing down. Lift off, press down, lift off, press down. Just to try and remove it to blend in those tones. And it only takes just a few clicks. And I always tend to do around about 30% to do that to help it to blend in. And again, if I turn that on and off, you can see the difference that's made. Now I am going to just clone over just a few areas here just so that we get rid of a couple of repeating patterns. So let's just rename this one tones because that's what we did that with. And I'm going to create another blank layer. This one I'm going to call cloning. O-N-I-N-G, like that. Get my clone stamp tool, this time at 100%, so I press 0 on my keyboard, make the brush just a little bit smaller, and I'm going to choose an area over here to put over here, because if it's not directly next to it, your eyes aren't really going to notice it that much. So I'm going to go here and line it up and then just paint away, something like that looks good. Okay, so that's one area. Anything I need to do over here? There's a little bit of dust just there, so let's just reduce the size of it and we'll get rid of that. Okay, double click on the hand tool to make it go smaller, make it go full screen. And straight away, I'm actually noticing there's a spot in the sky just here. Now I know that we're going to be putting texture in and it's lightly cover it over, but I want to show you the advantages of of working non-destructively, because originally I came from Lightroom as a smart object, and you can see that in the layers panel. The actual background layer here is a smart object, and that's indicated by the icon in the bottom right. So what I can do is I can double click on that thumbnail there to then take me back into Camera Raw. Now it won't go back into Lightroom, but it will go into Camera Raw, which is the same engine. So I can now use the spot removal like I should have done when I was originally in Lightroom to get rid of that spot in the sky. So I'll go to the spot removal tool, and when I click on that, what you'll notice is these little pins show up. And you'll remember from when I was working in Lightroom, these are the actual pins that I did or actually used when I was removing those people. So everything follows through because the Lightroom engine and the Camera Raw engine is all the same, and that's really, really handy. So what I'm going to do then, we've got a little tool at the bottom right hand corner here where it says visualize spots. So I'm going to put a little tick in that, and it turns your picture into like an alpha channel where you've got black and white areas. Now the one thing you have to be careful of, and I fell foul of this quite a few times when I first started using it, I kind of thought that, oh, these white dots here are spots that I need to remove. But they're not, they're the pins. So I kept trying to remove these pins and they just wouldn't go, funnily enough. But the areas you have to look out for is just this one at the top left here. So just make sure that when you do use this, and you have already done some cloning and healing using Lightroom or Camera Raw, to turn the visualize spots on and off. So you know that these white dots are in fact pins as opposed to being spots, and you don't waste your time trying to remove them. But we can use the slider now to increase or decrease how much of these spots become visible. But the only one I'm really concerned about is the one on the top left here. So I'm going to use, on the right hand side where it says type, I'll actually just use heal. And I can use my right or left bracket keys. I'm just going to paint over that there and let Camera Raw do its thing. And then straight away you can see that it's removed it. So we can turn off visualize, where it says show overlay, turn off the pin so we can now see it with and without. There we go, something like that. It's looking good. In fact, there are a couple of little spots we could get rid of just here. So I'm going to reduce the size of it with my brush, paint in there, and Camera Raw does a great job of removing it. So one in there as well, and that's brilliant. Okay, and we'll just click OK. So here we are then, we're now back into Photoshop. So there's a few more things that I want to do. And the first one is just to sort out the actual deck chairs, because it's kind of bugging me that the red one is kind of dropping down lower than the blue one. So clicking on the background layer, which is a smart object, I'm going to go to filter and choose Liquefy. And what I'll do is let's just zoom in just a little bit. Let's just drag it down to about there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just push up the red chair and bring down the blue one just to level them out just a little bit. Before I do that, I'm going to use the freeze mask tool to paint over areas that I want to protect. I only want to move the actual red and the blue material. I don't want to affect anything around it. So I'm going to freeze it using the freeze mask tool. And anywhere I paint in red is going to protect those areas. So let's just paint all over this area here, just so it doesn't affect the wood, and that will make it look really obvious otherwise that I've done some changes. So once they're in place, I'm then going to use something like the forward warp tool, just nice and basic, make it nice and big using the right bracket key, and then just start pushing upwards. And you'll notice as I do that, it's not affecting the wood or anything at all around it. So it's just only making me be able to move around the material. So that's about there, and let's just bring this one down just a little bit, just to even them around. It was just one of those little things that was bugging me. So something like that. It doesn't have to be brilliant, but it's just yeah, that's fine. Okay, and we'll click OK. So now you can see the chairs have been balanced out. Great thing is it's still being used as a smart filter. So if I wanted to, I could just double click on the words Liquefy, go back into there and carry on making some changes completely non-destructively. So, but we'll come back out. Okay, so the next thing I want to do then is just start looking at the colouring in this. So I'm going to click on the uppermost layer. I'm going to press D on my keyboard so that my foreground and background colours over in the left hand side here at their default colour of black and white. And we'll double click on the hand tool to see the picture at full view. And all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get a gradient map. I'm going to turn this to black and white. There's lots of ways we can do black and whites, but a way that I really like is also using a gradient map. So with my foreground and background colours set to black and white, I'm just going to click on the gradient map in the adjustments panel here like so, and you'll see it turns it to quite a nice black and white. We don't want it to be completely black and white, it just needs to be desaturated. So I'm going to take the opacity of this gradient map down to around about 40%, and I can do that by pressing number 4 on my keyboard when I'm using the move tool in the upper left there. So 4 becomes 40%, 6, 60%, 0, 100%, and so on. So I'm going to go down to around about 40%, something like that. Okay, so now we're back then. I just want to start adding in these textures, and we can do that by actually using something I've shown before in a video, and that's using the Adobe Exchange. So if you go to your window menu, extensions and Adobe Exchange, what Photoshop brings up is almost like the App Store for Photoshop. So in here, there's lots and lots of paid or free stuff that you can actually get to add in to Photoshop. So if I click on free, one of the ones that I've installed is the one here called Adobe Paper Textures Pro. And there's lots and lots of other little applications, if you like, that you can add in very, very quickly, very easy. And they're also free. So I've added in this Adobe Paper Textures Pro. And what you'll do is once you've installed that, you'll find it where it says extensions here. You can see them down in the menu here. So I've got Adobe Paper Texture Pro, and I'll click on that. So now what it does is it brings up a panel with all these different paper textures, which are all completely free, that I can now use within my picture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding some of these in. But before we do, let's just zoom out on the picture just a little bit so we can see all of it. Whoop, there we go, like that. And I'm just going to start now clicking on some of these textures to add them into the picture. So the first one, I'll go for this one just here, click on that. It then adds it directly into the picture with that blend mode of soft light. Loving the texture that it's putting on there, but I don't like the colour, so I'll desaturate the colour out of that by clicking on the thumbnail, pressing Shift, Command and U to remove that yellowing. So it just leaves that texture. And we don't have to stop with one texture, we can just keep going through. So I'm just going to randomly select just a few more just to see what kind of look we can get on our picture. So let's just click on this one here, see what that gives us. Yeah, quite liking that one. And again, I think I'll desaturate it, Shift, Command and U. And then down the bottom, I want to try and choose one that can give me a bit of a frame going around the picture. And this one here in the bottom left definitely has darker edges going around it. So let's just click on that one and see what that can do for me. And yeah, I like that. Actually, I really do like that quite a lot. And again, I think, actually no, rather than desaturating it, I'm just going to lower the opacity down just a bit and see what that gives us. Something like that. Now, if I use the opacity, it actually gets rid of this border that I want, and I want to keep that, so I will desaturate it. So Shift, Command and U to desaturate it, something like that. Now this bottom bit down here where the actual texture has been overlaid onto these cobblestones looks a little bit too dark, but the great thing is these textures come with a layer mask. So I'm going to click on the layer mask, get a black brush, make sure that the brush is nice and soft, bring up the size of the brush as well, make it just a little bit bigger. And rather than painting it 100%, I'll probably paint it around about, I don't know, 40%. So we only take a little bit of that darkness away, something like that will be fine. Right, so let's keep things nice and tidy. Let's put all these textures into their own group. Uppermost one is selected. I'm going to hold down my shift key and click on the lower one so they're all selected there. Fly out menu in the layers panel, new group from layers, and we'll call that textures. And click OK, so they're all nice and tidy. Now there's lots more that we could be doing with this. In fact, let's just close that panel down just there so we can see it. What I want to do is just make sure that I've got this cropped right. I want these chairs to be right in the center. So I'm going to press C on my keyboard to get the crop tool here. But I'm going to make sure that it doesn't have a little tick. Where it says delete crop pixels, I'm going to take the tick out of there because I want to work non-destructively so that I can come back and make changes. If I deleted those pixels, I wouldn't be able to change the composition later on because they're gone. So what I'm doing now, then I'm going to click on the far right, and as I do that, I drag over, you see you get this 3x3 grid, and I want these chairs to be center. So I'm going to fit them in just around about there, looks good. So that's dead center. And I'm going to bring up the bottom as well, something like that. And then click on the tick just to commit that crop in there, a non-destructive crop, like so. The only problem now is that the final texture that we put in, where we added in this border going on the left and on the top, it no longer appears over on the right hand side of our picture. And that's because we brought in that right hand side when we did our cropping. But because we did that cropping non-destructively by leaving out that tick where it says delete crop pixels, we can actually now go back to our textures, click on the thumbnail of the one that gave us the border and go to edit and free transform. And you'll see you get these transform handles going outside of our picture, which means there is pixels there for us to bring in. So I'm going to click on the right hand line there and drag that in just to bring in that border. And I can also bring it up from the bottom as well. Okay, so to finish this picture off, I just want to give it that kind of vintage look that you can get in the Snapseed mobile app. And what I'll do is, first of all, just click on the tick just to commit what we've just done there. We'll move that texture back in. I'm going to close down the textures, and I want to now go over into Camera Raw with this picture as it is at the moment. If I just clicked on the background layer here and then went into Camera Raw, I would go into Camera Raw, but the only thing is I wouldn't see anything that I've done above it. So I want to actually now work on the picture with the stage it's at now. So what I'm going to do is close everything down. I'm going to make sure that everything is highlighted, and I'm going to put all of these layers into a smart object. So we're going to go over to the flight menu at the top and convert to smart object. Now what that's going to do is it's still going to allow me to have access to all the layers at any time. So we're working completely non-destructively, but it's now going to allow me to go into Camera Raw with the picture in its current state. And that's what I need to be able to finish the picture off. Okay, so now that we have our layers put into a smart object, I'm going to go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and there's one thing I want you to notice when we come into the Camera Raw now. You're going to see that on the right hand side and at the bottom, you can see that there's a definite line here where the picture seems to change on the outside border, almost like there's a different coloured frame. Well, all that is these pixels over on the right hand side and at the bottom are the pixels that you can't see when we did the crop. This is because we're working completely non-destructively. So you don't see those in the final picture, but when we're in Camera Raw, it shows you absolutely everything that you've got. It's just a great way to see that you are working completely non-destructively. But all we're concerned about are the areas within this kind of frame. So I'm going to first of all add a bit of a radial gradient to give us a border, a bit of a vignette. So I'm going to click in the middle and drag outwards. And obviously I'm only concerned with it being within this area here, not darkening down the outside here, because we're not going to see that in the final picture. So I'm going to click and drag the vignette over this way just a little bit. And then I'm just going to drop down the exposure. We can see that it's affecting the outside edges like so. That's looking good. And the next thing I'm going to do is just add a little bit of toning to this. So we're going to go to the split toning and just play around, give it a bit of a brown tint to it, because I really do like that vignette, that kind of vintage look that you can get within Snapseed, the mobile app that I've got on my iPhone and my iPad. So we'll just play around with some of the settings in here and bring up the saturation. And just this is literally just experimentation now to see the kind of thing that we can come up with. But again, it's all working completely non-destructive. Nothing is set in stone. We can always come back and make the changes later on. So there's something like that will do, and we'll click OK. So now you'll see when we come back into Photoshop, no longer do we see that border on the right hand side and at the bottom. We're only seeing the actual picture dimensions that we cropped down to non-destructively. So now that I think we're pretty much done, all that's left to do, because I originally came from Lightroom, is to go to File and Save, or we've got the keyboard shortcut of Command or Control S. Click on that, and what that's going to do is Photoshop's going to send the picture now back over into Lightroom with its updated final retouch version. So if I now head over into Lightroom, you can see here is my picture within my Lightroom catalog, and if I go before and after, before and after, so you can see the final picture compared to the original outer camera shot. Now, like I said, this picture wasn't intended to be anything earth-shattering. I thought this was just a good one to go through some techniques, to show you some things that you can do within Photoshop and Lightroom, and maybe also a little bit of a reminder about some of the things that are in there as well, like the Adobe Exchange. So there you go, that's all for now. Okay, so thanks for tuning into this week's episode. As always, if you've got any questions or comments, by all means, just drop me a line to glyn@glyndewis.com. And if there's any tips, tricks, or techniques you'd like to see in future episodes, again, just drop me a line and I'll see what I can do. Now, in regards to subscribing, the subscribe button's about here on the screen now. From now on, if you click on the subscribe button and you're a registered subscriber, each and every week I'm going to just choose one randomly and then send out a coupon to that person so they can then download one of my tutorials off my site completely free of charge. So just make sure that you click on the subscribe button just around about here. Okay, that's all for this week. Sorry about the glare. It's a little bit sunny at the moment. I'll see you next time. Done. Let's have a look. No, what?
Joe was a bit late.
Oh, do it again, do it again,
Yeah.
do it again, do it again.
Again.
God, amateurs.
I know.